Part 30. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 291. Chapter 291 Fighting. I thought this matter would just go away, but on the third day, Sulayun was basking in the sun in the yard when he saw the housekeeper Lao Yang running in. "Little miss, something happened with Master Xiaoxian." Sulayun got up from the recliner and asked, "What happened?" "The people in the academy said that Master Xiaoxian got into a fight with other children." Sulayun frowned. "Fight? This kind of thing can be big or small. The second young lady and the young lady have gone out. I think I will have to ask the young lady for a visit." Lao Yang bent slightly and said. Sulayun knew that her mother and second aunt were going out today to take Miss Susu to prepare some things for the wedding. "I'll just go there, Butler Yang. Send someone to deliver a message to my second aunt." "Yes. Miss, I will go with you." Mammy John came out from one side. She had had some contact with people in the capital. It might not be safe for the young lady to only take Lian Xian and Kuliu with her. Sulayun understood what Granny Zhang meant and nodded. The group of people quickly walked out of the courtyard and went straight to the Royal Academy. Before he even approached the school, the sound of children's arguments could be heard. Looking closely, Sun Yuxuan was grabbed by two nuns. There was a short boy standing in front of him, making faces at him. Sulayun's face suddenly turned ugly. There were some children and servants watching the excitement, including the master of the academy, but no one stood up to help Sun Yuxuan. Only Lin Qingqing was held by her grandma. She wanted to come forward to help, but she couldn't break away. "Green Willow," Sulayun said in a deep voice. Hearing Sulayun's cold voice, the three of them knew that the young lady was angry. Kuilu ignored the promise and hurriedly stepped forward, pulling the two nuns apart, one on the left and the other on the right. She is a martial arts practitioner. Although she is not necessarily stronger than the two nuns, she can use her skill skillfully. The two nuns let out a cry of pain and could only let go of their hands. "Elder sister." As soon as Sun Yuxuan saw the green willow, he looked up again. When he saw Sulayun, a smile appeared on his face. Subsequently, his eyes gradually became moist. Sulayun stepped forward and knelt down to examine Sun Yuxuan. Sun Yuxuan's face was scratched by something, leaving two marks, and the clothes on his body were also torn, but fortunately no bones were injured. "Does it hurt?" Sulayun touched the injury on Sun Yuxuan's face distressedly. He shook his head. "Xiaoxian is a man, it doesn't hurt." After saying this, Sun Yuxuan couldn't help but frown, obviously in pain. She rubbed Sun Yuxuan's head, then stood up and looked at the boy opposite. "Did you hit Xiaoxian?" Her voice was cold, and there was a chill in her eyes. Even if the other person is a child and hurts her family, she will not be soft-hearted. When the boy first saw Sulayun, he thought it was a fairy descending to earth. But when he took a second look, he was frightened by her cold expression and couldn't help but take a step back. But thinking about the support behind him, the boy's courage came back. "You, who are you?" "It's just that I still stutter a little when I speak." Sulayun's eyes moved away from the boy and slowly fell on the woman behind him. The other party is dressed luxuriously, but just looking at his face makes people feel inconsistent. It's like a little girl who has secretly worn an adult's clothes. "I am Xiaoxian's sister." "Elder sister." The woman muttered something in her mouth, as if remembering something. She stepped forward and said, "Are you the Lord Pingle Township?" As soon as the words Pingle Xiangjun came out, everyone around him came to his senses and saluted Sulayun one after another. Although the Xiangjun has no real power, the emperor personally ordered the granting of the title. Ordinary people must not be careless when seeing this. Sulayun nodded lightly, indicating to everyone that there was no need to be polite. "Who are you?" she asked the woman. When the woman learned that Suleun was the lord of Pingle Township, she couldn't help but say in a respectful tone, "I am Minur's mother, and my husband is Chiu, the censor of Zuoki Andu. You are not my mother." Chai Ming suddenly shouted, not giving the other party a good look at all. Even if the woman came to support him, he didn't show any gratitude at all. The woman's face turned slightly pale, thinking, Ming'er has always been like this. I apologize to the local gentleman on his behalf. No need, he didn't mean to make things difficult for me. Suleun frowned. She always felt that there was something wrong with what the woman said, but she couldn't explain it for the moment. She looked at Chai Ming. You haven't answered my question just now. He hit me first. Chai Ming pointed at Sun Yuxuan fiercely, angry. Sun Yuxuan's eyes suddenly became round. You were obviously the one who started talking nonsense. Sister Leun, it was Chai Ming who came to trouble me and Xiaoxian first. Lin Qingqing had already broken away from her grandma, ran to Suleun, and pulled her dress, timidly. Of course Chai Ming denied it. I didn't cause any trouble for you, it was Sun Yuxuan who hit me on purpose. It's obviously you. It's you. The three children quarreled again and were about to get together again. Suleun coughed lightly and pulled Sun Yuxuan back. She looked at the husband beside her and said, since the three children can't tell clearly, is there anyone else who saw the situation? The master did not dare to respond. When I arrived, the two young masters were already fighting each other, and several children saw it. Can you please invite those children over? Certainly. The master waved his hand and asked the book boy to call someone. After a while, several children ran over, chattering. Chai Ming was teasing Qingqing, but Qingqing didn't want to, so Xiaoxian pushed Chai Ming away. Chai Ming always said that Qingqing would marry him in the future, so we were not allowed to play with Qingqing. I saw that Xiaoxian moved first, but Chai Ming also hit Xiaoxian several times. The children talked to each other, and they roughly explained the previous situation. Sun Yuxuan pushed Chai Ming, maybe because he was a little stronger, and pushed Chai Ming to the ground. Chai Ming naturally refused, stood up and rushed towards Sun Yuxuan, and the two people struggled together. Sister Leun, I don't like Chai Ming. Mother also said that Qingqing will only marry the person she likes. Lin Qingqing leaned against Suleun, her voice was clear and powerful. Hearing Lin Qingqing's words, Chai Ming's face shrank visibly. It seems that this sentence is very damaging to him. Sun Yuxuan even covered his mouth and started laughing when he saw Chai Ming's look. Xiaoxian, come here. Suleun shouted, and Sun Yuxuan came over obediently. Elder sister. Go and apologize to Chai Ming. Why? Sun Yuxuan's eyes widened in surprise. It was clearly Chai Ming's fault. Why did his sister want him to apologize? Thinking like this, Sun Yuxuan naturally refused to speak. Did you push Chai Ming and push him to the ground? Yes. Sun Yuxuan hesitated for a moment and returned reluctantly. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 292. Chapter 292. Since you did it, don't you dare to admit it? Suleun asked. When Sun Yuxuan heard this, he immediately replied, of course I dare to admit it, but he also beat me. He stretched out his hand, pointing his chubby index finger at Chai Ming. He doesn't dare to admit it, so you have to apologize even more. Ah! Sun Yuxuan was stunned. Suleun's eyes fell lightly on Sun Yuxuan. Realizing that his sister did not mean to joke, Sun Yuxuan pursed his lower lip, stepped forward and whispered to Chai Ming, I'm sorry. Ha ha ha, Sun Yuxuan, I just said you were wrong. As soon as Chai Ming heard Sun Yuxuan's words, he immediately threw his head back and laughed. He was obviously very happy to see Sun Yuxuan bow his head in front of him. Sun Yuxuan heard his laughter and clenched his hands in anger. But he also knew that he couldn't do it again, he didn't want his sister to see it. Okay, Xiaoxian has apologized, now it's your turn, you should apologize to Xiaoxian. Sulayun stepped forward, put his arms around Sun Yuxuan's shoulders, and patted him gently, with a comforting meaning. Chai Ming was still laughing, but he stopped laughing when he heard Sulayun's words. He glanced at Sulayun, then rolled his eyes. Why should I apologize to him? He was the one who hit me. He was the one who hit you first, but you were also the first to touch Ching Ching and talk nonsense, right? Sulayun's tone was calm and seemed to lack any momentum. Just now, Sulayun asked Sun Yuxuan to apologize. Chai Ming saw this. He felt that Sulayun was afraid that he knew his father's identity and was afraid that his father would cause trouble for them, so he asked Sun Yuxuan to apologize. In the heart of a child, Sulayun's actions will make him feel that he can do whatever he wants, since he has his father anyway. Chai Ming was even more arrogant. What I said is all the truth. Do you know the laws of the Dacian dynasty? What are the penalties for molesting a girl from a good family in public? Sulayun was clearly asking with a smile, but it made people feel chilly for no reason. The people around me looked at me and I looked at you, and they all wondered why Sulayun asked such a question. Still facing a child? Ching Ching, is he teasing you? Seeing Chai Ming didn't answer, Sulayun looked at Lin Ching Ching and asked. Lin Ching Ching seemed to realize that there was something in Sulayun's words, and nodded heavily. Yes, Sister Layun, he is teasing me. You will be my wife from now on, I am not teasing you. Chai Ming didn't know whether he was stupid or too arrogant, but he said such words again in front of everyone. A flash of pride flashed across the eyes of the woman behind him, but her face was panicked. Ming-er, don't talk nonsense, how old are you and Ching Ching? Now that Ching Ching has other friends, how can we predict what will happen in the future? These words sounded like persuasion, but they also had a hidden meaning. I don't care, I want to marry Ching Ching. Hearing the woman's words, Chai Ming suddenly became anxious. Before Sun Yuxuan came to the Royal Academy, he played very well with Lin Ching Ching, but as soon as Sun Yuxuan came, Lin Ching Ching stopped playing with him. This is all Sun Yuxuan's fault. Chai Ming's eyes widened. He took a few hurried steps and walked to Sun Yuxuan. He stretched out his hand and was about to push Sun Yuxuan to the ground. Sulayun had been paying attention to Chai Ming's actions. She stretched out her hand to pull Sun Yuxuan over, but Chai Ming missed the opportunity. Instead, she failed to stand and fell forward with her hands waving. Sulayun frowned and quickly stretched out his other hand to hold Chai Ming. Chai Ming's head was just a hair away from hitting the stone on the ground. Since you are unwilling to apologize, then we will go to Dali Temple and let the officials administer justice. Because of a fight between children, I had to go to Dali Temple. This was the first time I had seen such a situation. When the woman heard this, the worry on her face became real. If she really went to Dali Temple and the news spread, she would definitely be scolded by her husband and mother-in-law. Xiangjun, this is a small matter, why do you bother the people of Dali Temple? The woman became anxious and stepped forward to persuade him. Sulayun looked at the woman. In my opinion, this is not a trivial matter. Fighting between children is common, but it is not uncommon for fights to cause death. This first time, it was the face that was hurt, but what about the next time? Is it possible that it would not be considered a trivial matter until a life was involved? The woman took a breath. She felt that what Sulayun said was a bit exaggerated, but she didn't know how to refute it. Even if Chai Ming fights in the academy, it's not just once or twice. My young master was beaten once. Do you think there is something wrong with his nature? My young master was also beaten. The surrounding servants suddenly started talking, and it was only after this discussion that they discovered that there were actually many children who had disputes with Chai Ming, and each time they ended up in a fight. Mr. Chai's official position is higher than that of many people, and in the Metropolitan Procuratorate, there are fewer people who dare to offend the Chai family, so many people just ignore it and even go to the Chai family with gifts to apologize. There are still some servants who can't help but be punished, and are somewhat resentful towards Chai Ming. This is the first time that someone dares to be so direct. There are many people supporting Sulayun. However, the servants were still servants after all, and they did not dare to speak out in support. They just complained a few words secretly and showed their support without leaving any trace. Sulayun felt strange when the children talked about the situation earlier. Just a few days after Sun Yuxuan came to the academy, the children called him Xiaoxian. Chai Ming should have been in the Royal Academy for a long time, but when everyone called him, they still used his first name. Children's preferences are the most intuitive. Chai Ming is not very popular in the academy. If you don't have any suggestions, please take Chai Ming to Dali Temple with us. Sulayun listened to the comments of the people around him, silently withdrew his gaze and faced the woman. The woman opened her mouth and smiled. Xiangjun, there must be another solution. Let's do this. I'll ask Ming to apologize. As she said that, she pulled Chai Ming. The latter had just stood firm and had not yet recovered from the situation where he was about to fall. He was suddenly pulled by her, and he leaned back and fell to the ground. Chai Ming felt the pain when his hit the ground hard, and finally came to his senses. I don't know if it was because of the special position of the fall, but Chai Ming's eyes immediately turned red. Tears welling up in my eyes. Ming apologize quickly. The woman didn't pay attention to Chai Ming's falling to the ground, and the hand holding Chai Ming's arm was slightly harder. I don't want it. Chai Ming held back his tears and started acting up. Seeing him making such a fuss, the woman saw Sulayun's face becoming colder and colder, and she bit her lower lip. Snapped. Only a loud slap was heard. Even Sulayun was stunned for a moment. If a child has a bad temper, parents must be responsible. The reason why she presses so hard is because she hopes that the woman can understand that blindly pampering her child is not a good thing. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 293. Chapter 293 Change to penalty copy. Chai Ming received the slap, and his cheeks immediately became red and swollen. The woman didn't exert much force, but the sound was a little loud. But when she saw the injury on Chai Ming's face, she hurriedly reached out to touch it. The hand that had just hit Chai Ming was still shaking a little. There were faint traces of blood on the nails. It turned out that her nails accidentally hit Chai Ming's face, which made the situation look a bit serious. Get out of here, you bad woman. Chai Ming knocked the woman's outstretched hand away, glared at her fiercely, and ran away. Don't go after the young master yet. The woman shouted, and the servant behind her realized what she was doing and chased Chai Ming. Xiangjun, look at Ming he is not like this on weekdays. Please stop pursuing this matter. Sulayun was about to say something when Sun Yuxuan pulled her. She turned her head and looked sideways. Sun Yuxuan frowned and said in a somewhat uncertain voice, Sister, if not, forget it. Noticing the worry in Sun Yuxuan's eyes, Sulayun understood what he meant and looked at Lin Qingqing again. The latter also shook his head. Sister Leun, I want to go back. Good. Sulayun looked at the woman. Today's matter, since the children said forget it, let it go. I just want to trouble Mrs. Chai to discipline Chai Ming more in the future. After all, once or twice is fine. It has happened so many times. One sentence will suffice. That's what Xiangjun said. Mrs. Chai felt relieved, as long as she didn't go to Dali Temple. Suleun pulled Sun Yuxuan and Lin Qingqing out of the academy. Sister Leun, will Chai Ming be beaten when he returns? Lin Qingqing's tone was a bit hesitant, and she didn't know whether she wanted Chai Ming to be beaten or not. If you do something wrong, you will naturally be punished. Suleun couldn't answer this question. Whether Chai Ming will be punished depends on how the Chai family educates Chai Ming. But each family has its own way of punishment. It doesn't have to be beating. Just like Xiaoxian. Suleun's eyes moved to Sun Yuxuan. Although Sun Yuxuan was also injured today, when he returns to the Sun Mansion, he is afraid that he will be punished by Qin Zian. Xiaoxian may have to face the wall and think about it today. Elder sister. Sun Yuxuan blushed slightly, his eyes evasive, as if he was embarrassed in front of Lin Qingqing. Sister Leun, does Xiaoxian have to face the wall and think about it? He started a fight today, so of course he will be punished. Suleun replied. But Xiaoxian is doing it for me. Sister Leun, please help Xiaoxian to plead for mercy. Don't let Xiaoxian punish Xiaoxian with her own hands. Lin Qingqing acted coquettishly, and Suleun couldn't bear to refuse, so he naturally agreed. After sending Lin Qingqing back to the Lin family, Suleun took Sun Yuxuan back. As soon as he entered the door, Qin Zian was already waiting. Mother! Sun Yuxuan shouted softly and immediately hid behind Suleun. Since returning to the capital, Qin Zian has told Sun Yuxuan more than once not to cause trouble, but something happened to him today, and of course he was afraid that Qin Zian would be angry. Second aunt, what happened today? Li Yun, let him speak for himself. Qin Zian felt distressed when she saw the injury on her son's face, but she still had to keep a cold face. Only in this way could Sun Yuxuan remember it. Sun Yuxuan stretched out his head and whispered the story again. Mom, I know I shouldn't push people, I was wrong. Do you really know you're wrong? After hearing what happened, Qin Zian also understood that Sun Yuxuan could not be blamed for this incident alone, and her face softened a bit. I know, and I even apologized to Chai Ming. Sun Yuxuan muttered, he was still a little dissatisfied. After all, he apologized to Chai Ming, but Chai Ming hasn't apologized to him yet. But when he thought about Chai Ming receiving a slap, Sun Yuxuan felt a little pity for him again. Although he was often spanked by his father when he was in the Northwest, the degree of humiliation between a spanking and a spanking was different. Real. Qin Zian was stunned for a moment, a little suspicious. How could she, the mother-in-law, not know what her son's temperament is? Even though he is usually very carefree and tough, in fact he has a stubborn temper, just like his father. What's more, he really wasn't the one who started this matter. Would her son really be willing to apologize? Second aunt, Xiaoxian did apologize to Chai Ming, and Aunt Zhang and the others saw it. Suleun received Sun Yuxuan's look for help and spoke. Grandma Zhang and others also nodded, indicating that they had indeed seen it. In this case, today my mother will not punish you by facing the wall to think about your fault. Instead, I will punish you by copying. Ah! Sun Yuxuan thought Qin Zian meant not to punish him, but when he heard the word penalty copy, he felt even more aggrieved. Facing a penalty is more tiring than facing a wall and thinking about your fault. But he couldn't object, so he had to be taken back to the yard by his servants to treat his wounds first. Qin Zian was worried and asked Suleun a few more questions. In the final analysis, it was Sun Yuxuan who made the first move, there is no escaping this. Therefore, I decided to go to Chai's house tomorrow to check on the situation. Suleun did not stop Qin Zian. She knew that her second aunt had her own reasons for doing so. Jiawen. My mother's name was given by my grandmother, and even my mother's courtyard in the Sun Mansion was decorated little by my grandmother. The word Jia also expresses the grandmother's blessing to the mother. In the room, Sun Gro was teaching Zhang Susu how to sew a quilt. Mother, aunt. Hearing Suleun's name, Jiang Susu's hand shook and she accidentally pricked her finger with a silver needle. But she ignored the blood drops on her hands and blushed with embarrassment. Leun, Changping, and I are not married yet. Auntie, do you think my uncle will regret it before the wedding? So Leun deliberately made a joke. Seeing how childish she was, Sun Gro reached out helplessly and tapped her head lightly. You've already called me aunt, but you still dare to make fun of me. My aunt will definitely not blame me, right? Soleun pursed his lips and smiled, with a hint of coquettishness. Of course, Jiang Susu will not be angry. She also understands in her heart that she has no relatives in the capital. The Sun family is worried about her discomfort and treats her almost as a relative. This feeling is a warmth that she has not experienced for a long time after her parents died. She is very grateful to the Sun family. Soleun accompanied Sun Gro and Jiang Susu to dinner before leaving. After washing, Soleun was half lying on the couch, still reading. When Lian Xian came in to remind him, Soleun came back to his senses, put down the book in his hand, and prepared to sleep. I lay down and tossed and turned for a while, but still didn't fall asleep. Soleun sat up and asked, Lian Xian. Miss. You, why do you look so bad? Lian Xian walked around the screen and noticed at a glance that Soleun's face was pale. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 294. Chapter 294 Jin Palace. Soleun raised his eyes and looked at Lian Xian, seemingly not understanding what she said. Soon, Lian Xian came over with a glass of water and a bronze mirror. Soleun's face was reflected in the bronze mirror. Soleun was stunned when he saw his pale lips in the bronze mirror. She didn't feel uncomfortable, but her face clearly didn't look normal. Before Soleun could figure it out, there was a sound from outside. There was a knock on the door. Miss, it's the young master, he seems to be injured. The voice of Kuliu came. Soleun didn't hold the cup for a moment, and the water in it spilled on the bed. Not caring about this, Soleun stood up in a panic. Before Lian Xian put her coat on her, she had already ran out of the house. In the yard, Suye was supported by Sun Wen and sat on a stone bench. He was dressed in black, and you could smell the smell of blood when you got closer. Brother, where are you injured? Soleun asked and wanted to check, but was stopped by Suye. Not my blood. That is how the matter. Soleun looked at Suye, rarely anxious. So much blood, what happened? At this time, the sound of an update came. At the third watch of the clock. At this time, the entire capital was already asleep. Something happened to King Jin. Suye looked around. He climbed in through the courtyard wall and didn't disturb anyone else. Except for the two brothers and sisters, those present were Sun Wen, Lian Xian, and Kuliu. Hence, he felt free to briefly talk about the matter. He and the King of Jin secretly went out on official business. No one should know the itinerary, but he didn't want to be ambushed on the way back. Those were all dead soldiers, and they did not lead many people. After fighting for a long time, they were still at a disadvantage. Only Suye and Xiao Shenjiao were still standing. But what they faced were dozens of dead soldiers. Suye wanted to break off the rear and let Xiao Shenjiao leave first, but he didn't expect the other party to ambush, so Xiao Shenjiao accidentally fell into the trap. Seeing that something was going to happen to both of them, Lu Feng and He Ying arrived with their people. Seeing that their reinforcements were coming, the dead soldiers killed themselves with their swords without leaving any chance. The news of King Jin's accident must not be spread in the capital. Liu Feng and the others have already sent King Jin back to the palace. Suye sighed. He didn't come back specifically to say this. Originally, nothing happened to King Jin, and he should leave for Yangzhou tomorrow, but now he can only go there first. I estimate that I will stay for about 10 days, and I will rush back as soon as possible to attend my uncle's wedding. Brother, wait a moment. Sulayun turned around and ran back to the house, and soon came out with a bag of tips. She handed the kit to Suye. There are some antidote pills in it, which can detoxify common poisons. Even the more toxic ones will be effective. You can take them with you. Suye's words were very plain, but Sulayun knew that what he was going to Yangzhou to do was probably not simple. Okay, you take care of yourself and your mother and the others. Suye put the brocade bag into his arms and reached out to touch the top of her hair. Brother is gone. Looking at Suye's leaving figure, Sulayun pursed his lips. Brother, nothing will happen to him. Early the next morning. Looking at Sulayun, who was in a daze holding the rice bowl, Sun Gro glanced at Lian Xian with doubtful eyes. Lian Xian shook her head in embarrassment, saying that she didn't know. Yunur, what's wrong with you? It's true that your brother set off to Yangzhou so late, and he didn't know why he was in such a hurry. Sun Gro took a bite of food to Sulayun and spoke. Sulayun blinked, put the dish into his mouth, chewed it a few times and swallowed it. She only ate half of the bowl of white porridge before she put it down. Mom, I forgot. I have to go to Baikatang to collect herbs this morning. I'm going out first. I have to finish my meal if I'm in a hurry. Sun Gro saw the half bowl of porridge left and wanted to call Sulayun to stop, but he had already walked out. She shook her head helplessly and asked the servants to put away the dishes. Sulayun took Kuliu and Liangzin out, but did not go to Baikatang. Miss, are you going to Prince Jin's mansion? Lian Xian walked forward and asked in a low voice. This direction is indeed the direction of the Jin palace. Sulayun was stunned. She didn't even notice it. But since we have already walked a long way, we might as well go over and have a look. After all, there was cooperation between Xiao Shenjiao and her. If you care about your partners, there should be no problem. Sulayun persuaded himself and his steps became steady. There was a carriage parked at the door of Prince Jin's mansion. The sign hanging above belongs to Prince Yu's mansion. Xiao Jin got off the carriage, waved his fan, turned his head slightly and saw Sulayun. Miss Su. He smiled and walked up to Sulayun. Greetings to His Royal Highness King Yu. I forgot, Miss Su is now the Lord of Pingle Township, but why are you here? His Royal Highness the King of Jin asked me to come here, saying that he had found a plum blossom and wanted me to see if it could still be fed. Sulayun was silent for a moment and spoke softly. It's just the hands hidden in the sleeves, but they are clenched tightly. She lowered her head, not daring to look at King Yu, for fear that she would not be able to hide the hatred in her eyes. Xiao Jin took a look at Sulayun, noticed her slightly trembling shoulders, and sneered in his heart. It seems that she is just a girl with better luck. He still didn't pay attention to what happened at Li's villa. In that case, let's go in together. Yes. Sulayun followed Xiao Jin into Prince Jin's mansion. This is Sulayun's first time coming to Prince Jin's mansion. Xiao Jin walked in front, with a leisurely posture, as if he were in his own mansion. Sulayun frowned slightly. She left home early, and the Sun mansion was also close, but Prince Yu's mansion was on the other side, but Xiao Jin came earlier than she did. Coming at this time, she had to doubt Xiao Jin's intentions. After all, Xiao Jin was able to ascend to the throne of God in his previous life, so he was not an ordinary person. Please also ask His Royal Highness King Yu and Lord Ping Lexiang to wait here for a moment while I go to inform you. Xiao Jin waved his hand, opened his clothes and sat down. She didn't seem to be in a hurry. Sulayun looked at it without leaving any trace, and then chose a place to sit down. After a while, the housekeeper came back. Ping Le Xiang Jun, the plum blossoms brought back by His Highness are now placed in the garden. Your Highness said it is up to Pingle Xiang Jun to decide what to do. I asked the maid to take you there. Sulayun's eyes flashed. She came here on a whim and made up a scam to hide it from King Yu. Fortunately, the steward was on the right track and nothing went wrong. She stood up and said, that would be troublesome. After saying that, she looked at King Yu and said, Your Highness, King Yu, I'll go over first. Go ahead. Xiao Jin waved his hands nonchalantly and tasted the tea brought by the maid. His Royal Highness King Yu will have to wait a moment. His Highness has just practiced martial arts and needs to wash up before coming over. The housekeeper turned to Xiao Jin and explained. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 295. Chapter 295 A little help. Xiao Jin swallowed the tea in his mouth and said nonchalantly, It doesn't matter, I will just wait. The calm and relaxed look made Sulayun a little more confused. What exactly is Xiao Jin here? Sulayun followed the maid and left. When we got to the garden, the maid walked away. Miss Su. Lu Feng's voice came from behind. Sulayun turned around and was startled. There is no other reason, just because Lu Feng's current appearance is really scary. I saw that his hair was disheveled and his eyes were dark, as if he had been sucked out of essence. Can His Highness King Jin still get up? Although Sulayun was taken aback, he reacted quickly. Brother Suya has never been the kind of person who would deliberately exaggerate the truth. Xiao Shenjiao must have been seriously injured. Even if a person is awake, he may not be able to get up. Your Highness's condition is not good. Lai Yufeng shook his head and said in a deep voice. Sulayun noticed his reaction, Is there anything I can do to help? Hearing this, Lai Yufeng hesitated for a moment, and then said, If Miss Su is willing, you can indeed be of some help. In the hall, Xiao Jin had already drank 2 cups of tea, and his expression became increasingly impatient. He put the teacup on the table and stood up. Why hasn't third brother come for so long? There was a hint of embarrassment in the butler's eyes, and he stepped forward quickly. Your Highness, please wait a moment, I'll go take a look. No need, I'll just go over with you and have a look. After saying that, Xiao Jin walked straight in regardless of the housekeeper's obstruction. His Royal Highness King Yu. The housekeeper hurried forward, but couldn't catch up with Xiao Jin's speed. Seeing that he was about to reach Xiao Shenjiao's dormitory, Black Eagle walked out from the side and said, Your Highness, Prince Yu, the prince is in the garden now. You can go to the garden to find him. Garden? Xiao Jin raised his eyebrows lightly, as if he didn't believe it. Didn't you say that the third brother is washing up? Something happened in the garden, so the prince rushed over. Then I, the king, should go and have a look too. Xiao Jin turned around and walked towards the garden. The speed is actually slower than before. In the pavilion, Xiao Shenjiao was sitting on a stone bench, with Lai Yufeng standing beside him. Sulayun stood not far away. Your Majesty, I can't save this plum blossom. She was holding a bright red plum blossom in her hand. It's just that although the flowers are brightly colored, they don't have any vitality at all. Even you can't do anything. If it had been a few days earlier, there should have been a chance, but now there is no chance. Sulayun shook his head. Third brother. Xiao Jin's voice broke the atmosphere in the garden. He shouted and walked towards Xiao Shenjiao. Until he stood in front of Xiao Shenjiao. Third brother, please let me wait. What brings you here? Xiao Shenjiao did not look at Xiao Jin, but asked lightly. Xiao Jin stared at Xiao Shenjiao for a long time, and said in a brisk tone, It's nothing, I'm just bored, so I came to see my third brother to play. It would be strange for you to come to me instead of looking for my sixth brother. Xiao Shenjiao chuckled, not quite believing what Xiao Jin said. Xiao Jin raised his eyebrows and said, Third brother, what you said is wrong. We brothers haven't had a good get-together in some days, so why not just let's do it today? With that said, he stepped forward and put his hand on Xiao Shenjiao's shoulder. Hands are slightly exerted. Xiao Shenjiao said without changing his expression, since the fourth brother said so, that's fine. Your Highness. Sulayun frowned slightly and couldn't help but speak. Hearing her voice, Xiao Shenjiao thought of something. I have forgotten my promise to Miss Su. It seems I can only postpone it for now. What did third brother promise to Miss Su? Xiao Jing glanced at the two of them strangely. Xiao Shenjiao had saved Sulayun from falling into the water, so many people in the capital said that there was something fishy between them. Later, Xiao Shenjiao led the troops to go on an expedition, and those things happened again in the Su family, but no one mentioned the things between them anymore. Now, what else does Sulayun want to do with Xiao Shenjiao? I heard that Mr. Gu is interested in accepting a disciple. I originally wanted to ask His Highness King Jin to introduce Mr. Gu for me and ask for my cousin. Since His Highness King Yu has an appointment with His Highness King Jin, I can just wait a few days. The king will leave for Yangzhou tomorrow. Xiao Shenjiao suddenly spoke and said something. The decision to go to Yangzhou was made early in the morning, and Xiao Jin also knew it. He didn't really come to invite Xiao Shenjiao in the first place, but now he was happy to give Sulayun a convenience, so he said, in this case, why not wait for the third brother to come back from Yangzhou, and we brothers can make an appointment again. Thank you, His Majesty the King. Sulayun looked happy and bowed to Xiao Jin to express his gratitude. Xiao Jin was used to liking beautiful women, so seeing Sulayun like this made her feel a lot happy. Third brother, I'll leave first. He gestured to Xiao Shenjiao, then turned and left. After a long time, Xiao Shenjiao stood up suddenly in the pavilion. Lu Feng, is this okay? Young Master Murong's performance is really good. Lai Yufeng gave a thumbs up and gestured to Xiao Shenjiao. Sulayun felt relieved. In fact, she didn't do anything. It was all Lai Yufeng's idea. Fortunately, Xiao Jin did not dare to test more, fearing that he had some evil intentions in his heart. Miss Su, this pill of yours is really magical. It can also change people's voices. I wonder if you can give me a few pills. Murong Gu ran to Sulayun with Xiao Shenjiao's face in his face. Sulayun blinked, as if it was difficult to face it. I still have a few pills here. Master Murong can take them if you like. She handed the pills forward. This pill can only change the voice, and cannot specifically change it to a specific person's voice. However, Murong Gu's voice is too different from Xiao Shenjiao's. If it weren't for their similar body shapes, Lu Feng would not have made such a move. Now Xiao Shenjiao is still lying in bed, not knowing when he will wake up. Miss Su, it would be safer to ask Mr. Murong to go with you to Master Gu's house later. Lai Yufeng said. He was worried that Xiao Jin would send someone to investigate. As soon as they left, Murong Gu and Sulayun left Jin Prince's mansion and headed to Gu Mansion. Mr. Gu is indeed at the house. I heard that King Jin and Sulayun came together. He was a little surprised. I have met His Royal Highness the King of Jin, Lord Pingle Township. There is no need to be polite, Mr. Gu. Murong Gu is still playing Xiao Shenjiao, but fortunately Gu Yuanbei is not here, so he is not afraid of revealing his secret. After explaining the purpose of his visit to Mr. Gu, he stroked his beard and said in a deep voice, I do intend to accept a disciple, but masters and disciples also pay attention to the relationship between them. I will go to the Sun Mansion in person in a few days to take a look. How are you, kid? Uncle Gu is willing to give me a chance. Li Yun is extremely grateful. Sulayun smiled. The excuses given to Xiao Jin were not all false. Qin Zian said that she would rather have her children learn literature than let Sun Yuxuan take up martial arts. These days, she is also looking for a teacher. If Mr. Gu and Sun Yuxuan are destined, maybe they can be accepted as apprentices. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 296. Chapter 296, Breaking off the engagement. The matter has been finished, Mirangu and Suleun did not stay any longer. Just as the two stood up and were about to leave, they saw a familiar figure approaching. It is Guyuanbei. Suleun paused and looked at Mirangu. Your Highness, Sister Leun, why are you here? Guyuanbei didn't want to go this way, but when he raised his head and saw the two of them, he couldn't help but walked over. Master Gu smelled the smell of alcohol on his body and frowned. You kid, you went out to play all night and you still know how to come back. With that said, he stepped forward, grabbed Guyuanbei's ear, and pulled him inside. I feel like cleaning it up for me to avoid embarrassment. After the servants helped Guyuanbei leave, Master Gu smiled and said, You two are laughing. Mirangu shook his head. Fortunately, Master Gu took action in time, otherwise it would be bad if Guyuanbei discovered the problem. Thinking of this, Mirangu said, Master Gu, I have left first. Your Highness, walk slowly. After leaving Gu mansion, Suleun did not go with Mirangu. The latter returned to Prince Jin's mansion, while she naturally went to Baikatang. Miss, how long can you keep this secret? Quilayu asked curiously. Suleun glanced at her and shook his head, this matter has nothing to do with us. Can. Quilayu stopped talking. She could already understand what her young lady said. Even though it is said that my young lady helped His Highness Prince Jin today, as long as he didn't say anything, who would know that his young lady was helping His Highness Prince Jin? What's more, if this kind of thing really involves the young lady, I'm afraid even the Sun family will be affected. Suleun also knew this, but her brother specifically mentioned this to her. On the one hand, he trusted her, and on the other hand, I guess he had already made his own choice. Neither the elder brother nor the Sun family can avoid the matter of seizing the direct heir. In the Baiko hall, Suleun sat on a chair and closed his eyes to rest. Are you really here? Sidhu Dankai came in from outside and looked at Baiko hall. Suleun looked at her, stood up and saluted, Princess. Leun, didn't I say that? There is no need to be so polite between you and me, just call me by my name. Leun doesn't dare. Suleun's face was pale, and doubts arose in his heart. Why does Sidhu Dankai always come to her? I won't blame you, Sidhu Dankai said, thinking that Suleun was worried about being punished for not observing etiquette. However, seeing that Suleun was still persistent, he stopped trying to persuade her, I don't have any friends in the capital. It was quite fun to hang out with you and that girl from the Zhao family, so I just wanted to come and play with you again. Are you still free today? Princess, I have to attend a consultation today, so I'm afraid I won't have time to accompany you. Suleun showed a trace of embarrassment on his face. Sidhu Dankai, however, seemed to have encountered something interesting, and moved closer to Suleun. Suleun, you are good at medicine. Know a little bit. Then show me. Speaking, Sidhu Dankai raised his hand and handed it forward without any hesitation. Suleun pursed his lips and checked Sidhu Dankai's pulse. The princess's pulse is stable and she is in good health. Huh? I thought I could come up with something else. Sidhu Dankai muttered and stood up with a pout. It seemed that the problem was not found, which made her a little frustrated. Since it's inconvenient for you, Leun, I'll go find Miss Zhao. Sidhu Dankai did not stay long. He waved at Suleun and turned around. Looking at Sidhu Dankai's leaving figure, Suleun's eyes flashed. Sidhu Dankai's intimacy with her was really weird. And the Queen Mother's birthday banquet is over, why haven't they left yet? It seems that the envoys of Jaya Kingdom have not left either. Soon, a patient came in. Sulayun hid his thoughts and concentrated on treating the patient. This busy time has arrived in the evening again. Liangzin and Kuliu packed their things, and the master and servant were about to leave. When they were walking out, they were almost knocked down by a fat body. Kuliu pulled Liangzin to keep her from falling. "Young master!" A boy ran in. At this time, the man who was called young master was already lying on the ground, foaming at the corner of his mouth. "You guys, hurry up and save my young master!" the boy shouted. Dr. Li reacted and stepped forward. "Zinping, come and help me." Coming. Only Zinping and Dr. Li could not lift the person up despite the elder's efforts. The younger brother, who was still recuperating in Baiko Hall, heard the noise and came out of the backyard. Then he gave his hand and finally lifted the young master on the ground to the small bed next to him. "How is this going?" "I don't know either. My young master just came out to meet Miss Li today. Who would have thought that as soon as we met, he started to have vomiting and diarrhea, and that's what happened after that." As the boy was talking, Li Minmin also walked in from outside the house. "How is Mr. Zhou?" As soon as Li Minmin finished speaking, she met Sulayun's eyes. She was stunned. Why did she meet Sulayun again? Sulayun was also surprised that this was the second time she met Li Minmin with Mr. Zhou. Speaking of which, Mr. Zhou had some accidents these 2 times. "Oh, Miss Li, please don't come in, please go out quickly, my young master has had a few incidents after meeting you a few times, he's even scared." The boy quickly stopped Li Minmin, fearing that if she walked in and saw young Master Zhou, she would harm his young master again. Li Minmin smiled bitterly. "I didn't expect such a thing to happen. Maybe Mr. Zhou and I are not destined to be together. Miss Li, please go back first and wait until my son is well before we discuss this matter." The boy wanted to push Li Minmin out of Baikatang, but fortunately Li Minmin was not persistent. When he saw the boy resisting, he left. Dr. Li checked Mr. Zhou's pulse and confirmed that he had mistakenly ingested an insecticide poison. According to what the young man said, Mr. Zhou's food and drinks are all arranged by the government, so this problem should not arise. The young master just ate a chestnut given by Miss Li and suddenly felt unwell. The boy muttered, really couldn't figure out the reason. Sulayun raised his eyebrows, and Li Minmin's smiling eyes flashed before his eyes. Why does she think there is something wrong with those chestnuts? Fortunately, he arrived in time. Dr. Li asked Zinping to boil the medicine and give it to Mr. Zhou to drink. Once the toxins in the body are eliminated, everything will be fine. Sulayun saw that there was nothing she needed to help with, so she didn't stay any longer. Mr. Zhou went to the toilet several times and finally felt that he was alive. "I must break off the engagement," he shouted, but in fact he was too weak and his voice was not loud. The boy brought him a glass of water. "Sir, there must be a reason for breaking off the engagement, right?" "Reason? If your young master continues to stay with her, do you think I will still be alive?" End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 297. Chapter 297 Bad Luck. Mr. Zhou doesn't care about the impact of breaking off the engagement on Li Minmin and the Li family. He really feels that Li Minmin is a bit evil. Every time I go out with her, something bad happens. The reason cannot be found. Mr. Zhou took his servant angrily and rushed home. But to outsiders, Mr. Zhou's actions were particularly interesting. I saw him holding his stomach with one hand and holding his belt with the other, and he didn't dare to take a big step. With his short steps and his fat body, he looked like a roly-poly from a distance. As soon as Mrs. Zhou saw her son running back, she knew that something unexpected had happened again. "No, son, my mother will go to Tianbao Temple tomorrow to figure it out for you. Is it possible that Li Minmin will become the husband?" "Mom, please call off the marriage immediately." Mr. Zhou was crying. He didn't want to say how much pain he had experienced in the past half-month. He does like beauty, but he doesn't want to risk his life for Lee Min-min. Mrs. Joe said quickly, "Son, the Lee family is not someone we can break off the engagement casually." She was still a little hesitant. A skinny camel was bigger than a horse, so the Lee family was considered a good in-law family. If Lee Min-min hadn't been disgraced by her son, it would have been the Joe family's turn to get married. "Mother. Mr. Joe doesn't care about this. He has cancelled the marriage. If he comes again a few more times, his life may not be guaranteed." Mrs. Joe saw Mr. Joe's persistence and had no choice but to say that she would go to Tianbao Temple tomorrow to settle the matter before breaking off the engagement. "Maybe you can ask the master of Tianbao Temple to take a look. Maybe there is something wrong with your son's luck." Early the next morning, Mrs. Joe took Mr. Joe to Tianbao Temple. "Hand the requested lot to the master who interprets it." "Mrs. Joe, what are you asking for in the signature?" The master who interpreted the signature looked slightly gloomy and asked calmly. Mrs. Joe became nervous. "Master, I want you to see if my son's marriage can be successful." "Mr. Joe's marriage?" The interpreter looked at the signature for a moment and shook his head. "Although this lot is auspicious, Mr. Joe's marriage cannot come true." "Why?" Mrs. Joe frowned. The poor monk advised Mrs. Joe to call off the marriage as soon as possible. The master who interpreted the sign didn't know what he saw, so he advised, "If you insist on getting married, I'm afraid there will be death or injury." The words death and injury shocked both Madame Joe and Mr. Joe. "Will someone die?" Mrs. Joe became more and more hesitant. On the way down the mountain, sitting in the carriage, Mrs. Joe was still confused. "Son, it's not necessarily you who was killed or injured, right?" Mrs. Joe muttered to Mr. Joe. "If Lee Min-min dies first, will this situation be resolved soon?" Thinking of this, Mrs. Joe felt that this was a good idea. But Mr. Joe didn't think so. After this period of torture, he always felt that if they really got married, he would be the one who died. Or maybe, he will be finished before the wedding. Ouch! A wailing sound was heard. The driver said, "Madam, Master, there is someone blocking the road ahead. Get the person out of the way quickly." Mr. Joe was unhappy. "Yes." The coachman and the boy stepped forward to pull away the man dressed as a Taoist priest on the ground. But as soon as he got closer, he saw the other party jumping up and looking directly at the carriage. The coachman and the boy looked at each other. It was clear that this man was pretending to have a sprained foot just now, so why is he feeling better now? Could it be intentional? "What are you going to do?" "Leave quickly. This is the Joe family's carriage, and you can't mess with it." "What's waiting is your Joe family's carriage." The Taoist priest ignored the coachman and the boy and walked straight to the carriage. "What are you going to do?" The coachman and the boy stepped forward to pull the Taoist priest away, but found that neither of them could pull the other away. "Are they Mrs. Joe and Mr. Joe in the car?" the Taoist priest asked inside the carriage. Mrs. Joe opened the curtain and faced the gray-faced Taoist priest. Disdain rose in her eyes. Where did the beggar come from? "What are you doing in a daze?" "Driving him away." "Mrs. The boy spoke with an embarrassed look on his face. Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by the Taoist priest. "Mrs. Joe, Master Ling's marriage must not continue." "What do you mean?" Mrs. Joe looked at the Taoist priest in front of her in surprise. What did he know? With this appearance, I don't know how good a fortune teller is. "Mr. Joe, have you often gone out with Miss Lee recently?" "How do you know?" Once Master Joe heard this, he believed a lot in the Taoist priest. The Taoist priest laughed and said, "I also know that Mr. Joe has suffered a lot these days." Listening to the things the Taoist priest said, everything seemed to match up. Mrs. Joe and Mr. Joe looked at each other, both feeling shocked. After a while, Mrs. Joe and Mr. Joe asked the Taoist priest to get on the carriage. By the time they arrived at the Joe family, Mrs. Joe and Mr. Joe had already changed their previous attitude towards the Taoist priests and invited them into the house with great respect. "Taoist priest, please sit down quickly." Mrs. Joe asked the maid to serve tea and cakes. Taoist priest Weovai looked around. The Joe family was quite wealthy, and the sculptures and walls in this gallery were worth a lot. He lowered his gaze and said, "Mrs. Joe is too polite. You're welcome, what should you do about my son's marriage? It is inevitable to break off the engagement. What you said is that we must break off this marriage." Mrs. Joe's expression hesitated for a moment. Taoist Master Weovai couldn't tell that she was still reluctant. "I would also like to trouble Madam to give me the birthdays and horoscopes of Mr. Ling and Miss Li. I'll ask someone to get it." When the birth date was brought, Taoist Master Weovai looked at it for a long time and was amazed. "This is the first time I've seen such conflicting horoscopes. Taoist Master, these 8 characters conflict, but I have invited someone." "No, no, no." Taoist Master Weovai shook his head. "You have to look carefully at these 8 characters. If you don't have the right skills, you won't be able to tell the name inside them." Mrs. Joe's heart tightened. Along the way, Taoist Master Weovai told many things about their family. Even if Mrs. Joe didn't believe it, she had no choice but to believe it. Speaking of it, Pandeo also showed it to the Li family. "What does the Taoist mean? This Li family is not good for your Joe family's fortune." Taoist Master Weovai shook his head. Mrs. Joe bit her lower lip tightly. After all, she was worried about the safety of her family and her son. "I will break off the engagement tomorrow." "Mrs. Joe, there is no need to worry, there are also things to pay attention to when breaking off the engagement. Please give me some advice from the Taoist priest." Late night. Li Minmin sat at the table, but did not fall asleep. "Miss Li is waiting for me." "Master Weovai." Seeing the visitor, Li Minmin's face showed joy. "How is the Joe family doing?" "Miss Li, don't worry, there is no problem in breaking off the engagement." Priest Weovai caught a glimpse of Li Minmin's clasped hands and coughed lightly. "Have you prepared Miss Li's things?" End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 298. Chapter 298, Visiting to cancel the engagement. Li Minmin hesitated and handed the thing in her hand forward, which was a jade bracelet. She stole it from her grandmother. She didn't know why Taoist Master Weovai wanted such a thing, and the strange thing was that her grandmother hid the jade bracelet very deeply. She also spent a lot of effort to find it. Taoist priest Weovai's eyes lit up, and he was about to take the jade bracelet from Li Minmin's hand, but saw Li Minmin retracting his hand again. "Miss Li." "Taoist priest, what do you want this jade bracelet for?" Li Minmin was very grateful for Taoist Master Weovai's help. If he hadn't come up with those methods, she would not have been able to break off the engagement with Mr. Joe. "But my grandmother hid this jade bracelet so deeply that no one in the Li family knew about it." "How did Master Weovai know about it? What is he going to do with this jade bracelet?" Li Minmin was a little uneasy. She was worried that something would happen if the jade bracelet was given to Taoist Weovai. Will the Li family be implicated? Pandeo also understands Miss Li's worries. Taoist Master Weovai was not in a hurry, so he pulled up a chair and sat down. If he dares to ask Li Minmin to get this jade bracelet, he won't worry about Li Minmin not giving it to him. "But Pandeo really can't tell you what to do with this jade bracelet. But Pandeo can guarantee that this jade bracelet will not pose a great threat to your Li family. Then it will still have an impact." Li Minmin heard the meaning of Weovideo's long words. Her IQ seemed to be on the rise at this time. "Taoist Master Weovai, it was your father who brought you into the Li family before. Now that I think about it, You wouldn't have been doing it just for this jade bracelet from that time on, right? Miss Lee is overly concerned, Taoist priest Wu Wei said without changing his expression. It was your father who came to me personally. Li Minmin was stunned. She thought it was Taoist priest Wu Wei who came to the Li family, but she didn't expect that it was her father who came to Taoist priest Wu Wei. Is it really a coincidence? If Miss Lee is worried, and Pandeo is not in a hurry, why not wait until your marriage is over, and then Pandeo can come back and get this jade bracelet? I'm not. Before Li Minmin finished speaking, Taoist master Wu Wei had disappeared. She put away the jade bracelet in her hand, and when she lay down on the bed, her mood was still a little complicated, and it took her a long time to fall asleep. The Zhou family came to break off the engagement 2 days later. Li Minmin was chatting with her grandmother when she saw a grandma walking in. Old Madam, Miss, Mrs. Zhou's family is here. Mrs. Zhou. Mrs. Li is in good condition today and her face is quite rosy. She got up from the bed and changed her clothes under the care of her nanny. Li Minmin helped Mrs. Li walk to the front hall, and happened to meet Su Weiner. Grandmother. Su Weiner saw the two of them, walked forward with a smile, and stood on the other side of Mrs. Li. Why are you out? I'll just take care of Mrs. Zhou. You should have a good rest. It's okay, I feel quite comfortable today, it's good to go out for a walk and talk. Mrs. Li said softly, you have worked hard these days taking care of the Li family. This is what Warner should do. So many things have happened in the Li family recently, and Mrs. Li is also very satisfied with Su Weiner's ability to cope with it. Just thinking about my grandson lying on the bed now, I couldn't help but sigh. Mrs. Zhou waited in the front hall for a long time before she saw 3 people coming. Mrs. Li. Facing Mrs. Li, Mrs. Zhou was very respectful. Although Mrs. Li was not very satisfied with the marriage between Li Minmin and Mr. Zhou, she could only agree to it since the matter of innocence was a big or small matter. What brings Mrs. Zhou here today? Mrs. Li, I came here to talk to you about the marriage of my 2 children. Mrs. Zhou looked a little uneasy as she sat in her seat. Su Weiner frowned slightly, and Mrs. Zhou's expression made her feel something was wrong. If we were talking about the wedding situation, it shouldn't be like this. Mrs. Li also felt something was wrong. Aren't the marriages of the 2 children settled? Are there any other problems? That's it, Mrs. Zhou pursed her lower lip, thinking about what Taoist priest Wu Wei had said to her before, and moved her lips. I think it's better to forget about this marriage. What do you mean? Mrs. Li's face changed, and there was a hint of anger in her words. There is no sense in asking to break off the engagement without any reason. If it spreads out, wouldn't it mean that others will gossip about Min Min? Mrs. Li, don't be angry, don't make yourself angry. Mrs. Zhou arrived quickly, fearing that Mrs. Li would be angry. I didn't know about this before. No, I came to see you as soon as I learned about the situation. Mrs. Li did not respond. She just stared at Mrs. Zhou coldly to see what excuse she could come up with. Mrs. Zhou, what's going on? You also know that the 2 children's horoscopes are just passed by now that you want to break off the engagement. How can we, Min Min, get married in the future? Su Weiner seemed to be trying to smooth things over, but everything she said reminded Mrs. Li. How can Li Minmin get married if she really wants to break off the engagement to Mrs. Zhou? Mrs. Li, you don't know. Mrs. Zhou sighed helplessly, picked up the handkerchief and pretended to wipe the corners of her eyes. That's it, my son went out with Min Min that day, and something happened after they came back. Before, the 2 of them always went out together. I was worried about something happening, so I had someone recalculate it, and it turned out that the 2 children's horoscopes were actually in conflict with each other. If we really want them to be together, I'm afraid something will happen to one of them. Mrs. Zhou's tone sounded serious. Mrs. Lee's face turned a little pale. Are you telling the truth? Mr. Joe had several accidents. Madam Lee also heard about it from Lee Min Min, but she didn't take it to heart. Seeing Mrs. Joe say this at this time, we finally got in touch. In addition, the Lee family has had a lot of incidents recently, and Mrs. Lee believes in these things even more. When she heard Mrs. Joe's words, she couldn't help but become nervous. Mrs. Joe, haven't you calculated the horoscope before? You said it was pretty good, so why is there a problem all of a sudden? Suwaner felt more and more weird in her heart. When she said she wanted to get married, the Joe family had agreed, and the horoscopes had been calculated. Why did there suddenly be a problem? Even if the Joe family wants to regret their marriage, they shouldn't give such a reason. What's more, she will not allow the Joe family to cancel the marriage. She had chosen this marriage for Lee Min Min in the first place. I think so too, but Mrs. Lee, if you have seen my son, you will know that I am right. There is only Meow Meow in my family, how can I let anything happen to him? What's more, Min Min is also a good girl, we can't even watch something happen to her. At this point, Mrs. Joe wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief, looking really embarrassed and sad. Or, if you don't believe Mrs. Lee and Mrs. Lee, why not ask someone else? Mrs. Joe saw that Mrs. Lee was a little shaken, so she mentioned it again. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 299. Chapter 299, The Forbidden Army comes to the door. Lee Min Min's heart was lifted. Seeing that Mrs. Lee was shaken, she hurriedly said, Grandma, Min Min has told you before that every time Mr. Joe comes out, something bad will always happen to him. Isn't there something really wrong with our horoscopes? Her tone was a bit urgent, but seemed more sincere. Grandma, this kind of thing really shouldn't be taken lightly, but Min Min and Mr. Joe's horoscopes were already optimistic about their horoscopes. There was no problem at that time. If we rashly ask someone to read each other's horoscopes now, will we let others gossip? Of course Suwaner refused. How could there suddenly be a problem with these horoscopes? Out there, Mrs. Lee really went to find someone to figure it out and found out there was a problem. Wouldn't the marriage fall through? Mrs. Lee, you can find someone to look at you again if there are any problems, our Joe family will bear them. Mrs. Joe became anxious when she heard Suwaner's words. She couldn't help but glare at Suwaner. What kind of intentions did this woman have? Could it be that she wanted to kill her son? Suwaner concealed the dissatisfaction in her eyes and pretended to be confused. Mrs. Joe is so anxious to break off the engagement. Is there something fishy in it? Mrs. Joe's eyes widened. She didn't know what she was thinking of, but she suppressed her temper again. You can also check if there is anything fishy. Our Joe family has a good business and has nothing to hide. My son and Min Min, there is indeed something wrong with my horoscope. I can't watch my son get into trouble. Please ask Madam Lee to reconsider this marriage. Min Min was. All right. Old Madam Lee opened her mouth and stopped Suwaner's words. I will take another look at this matter. It wasn't such a big fuss at the beginning. Maybe there is still room for change. Mrs. Lee's words were somewhat in favor of terminating the engagement. Lee Min Min had made so many troubles before, and she also knew that her granddaughter was not satisfied with the marriage. Since there was a problem with the horoscope, there was no need to force the two children to be together. The joy on Lee Min Min's face could not be concealed. She was finally going to succeed. After sending Mrs. Joe away, Mrs. Lee called the housekeeper, Go and find Taoist Master Wu Wei, and I will read the two children's horoscopes again. Yes. Grandma, do you want to think about this matter again? Suwaner frowned slightly, as if she was thinking about the Li family, but in fact it was just to satisfy her own selfish desires. Her temperament is like this. A little bit of bad behavior in others will be remembered for a lifetime. She even felt that if they were really incompatible, it would be good if Li Minmin died, and she wouldn't need to see each other all day long. As for Mrs. Li and Mrs. Li, a dark look flashed in Suwaner's eyes. Once she had completely taken control of the Li family, there was no need to keep these two people. The Li family only needs one mistress. I've already thought about it. You tell the servants in the house to be more strict with their mouths. I don't have to worry about what they should and shouldn't say, right? Mrs. Li looked at Suwaner calmly, and the indescribable majesty still made Suwaner lower her head. Waner understands. Back in the courtyard, Suwaner asked Yuyeo to call Granny Lan. When Granny Lan arrived, the door of the house was also closed. What's going on with the Zhou family? Why do you want to break off the engagement suddenly? Suwaner asked. After Li Rui fell unconscious in bed, Suwaner did not live in the main house, but moved to a side room. He said to the outside world that he didn't want to affect Li Rui, but in fact it was for his own convenience. The old slave doesn't know either. Grandma Lan shook her head, her tone calm. Suwaner seemed to have noticed something, and stared at Granny Lan for a while, then suddenly said, Grandma Lan, why do I feel that you have been acting strange recently? Really? Granny Lan stretched out her hand to touch her face and smiled, maybe she is old and makes the lady laugh. You go check on the Zhou family's affairs for me. Also, I'll go back to the Su's family in the afternoon. You all go down. Yes. Grandma Lan and Yuyeo bowed and left the house. Yuyeo went to make arrangements to return to Su Mansion, while Granny Lan returned to her house. The bronze mirror reflected Granny Ian's wrinkled face. She frowned tightly, then changed her clothes and quietly left Li's house. A manor in the suburbs. Langu, why are you here? Tungno quickly opened the door and let Granny Lan in. The remaining people in the courtyard also put away their weapons and released their murderous aura. The people from the palace are still looking for you. Grandma Lan asked as she glanced at the tired expressions of several people. Fan Yu is the eldest among the group and the 11 tribesmen with Manzushawa tattooed on his arm. He said, we almost killed Kingan, how could the dog emperor let us go? People from Jaya Kingdom are still in the capital during this period, so you'd better go out less often. Grandma Lan reminded me. Dao Yuegyo is just a lackey of the dog emperor. Fan Yu's voice was cold and full of resentment towards Emperor Jianwen. I just want to remind you that it's up to you how to do it. Grandma Lan looked at one of them and said, I'm here to get medicine. One of the man's eyes was covered, and the exposed eye was dark black. He stepped forward and handed over the medicine bottle in his arms. After taking the medicine bottle, Granny Lan was about to leave when she heard another knock on the door. The expressions of several people in the courtyard changed. Granny Lan frowned and hid quickly. Tungno held his breath and slowly opened the door. The moment the door was opened, many people appeared from the courtyard wall and jumped into the courtyard. For a moment, only the light of swords and shadows were seen, and then, bright red blood spread out in the air. Those who broke through the door were the imperial guards from the capital. In terms of strength, Fan Yu and others were superior, but they were at a disadvantage due to the small number of people. Gradually, Fan Yu and others fell into a disadvantageous position. Elder brother. Tungno saw that his brother was injured, and his movements with the knife became even worse. Fan Yu noticed Tano's situation and used the crowd to hit him. Tungno, you have to leave. But. Nothing but. Fan Yu killed a forbidden soldier who came forward, his eyes bright. Tungno understood what he meant. One of them must not be caught. I see. He was determined, and his friends around him also helped him open a hole and let him leave. A few of the imperial guards went after Noda, while the rest struggled to catch Fan Yu and others. Running wildly on the path, Tuno did not dare to look back. His speed was so fast that only one of the Imperial guards could keep up. There was a steep ahead, and Tuno jumped down without blinking. It rolled all the way down. He crawled in the grass for a while, listening carefully to the movement around him. The sound sounded, and the Forbidden Army catching up was looking for him. As the footsteps approached, Tuno jumped up suddenly, swung his knife, and hit the opponent's neck. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 300. Chapter 300 Rescued. Before the Imperial guards recovered, the man fell to the ground. Just once, Tano's position was exposed, but one of the Imperial guards had been eliminated, and Tano was confident that he could defeat the remaining 3 Imperial guards. But 1-on-3 was a bit difficult. Tano eliminated the 3 Imperial soldiers and suffered a lot of injuries on his own body. The most serious injury was the stab wound to the waist and abdomen. He tore off his clothes, covered the wound on his abdomen, and stumbled toward a remote path. The blood from the wound also dripped all the way. A small wooden cabin appeared not far away. Tano's eyes lit up and he endured the severe pain and walked forward. Stumbled in front of the cabin. Before Tano could push the door was opened from the inside. Tano's outstretched hand suddenly dropped, and he threw himself forward. When Zhang Lao saw the man covered in blood in front of him bumping into him, he quickly turned aside. His old bones cannot support the weight of an adult man. Boom! Tano hit the ground hard, and you could even faintly see the dust flying around. Mr. Zhang frowned. The wounds on the man's body were obviously sword wounds. It was obviously not a trivial matter to receive such a serious injury on the outskirts of the capital. Help me! Tano used the last bit of strength to pull on Mr. Zhang's shoes, and blood stained Mr. Zhang's shoes. Lao Zhang hesitated again and again, not intending to save anyone, but when he lowered his head, he saw something familiar. His expression changed drastically. In a daze, Tano could feel someone opening his mouth and feeding something very bitter into his mouth. He even couldn't help but vomited a few mouthfuls, but then he was fed more bitter juice. Grandpa, what if we are discovered? Tano could hear an old man and a young man talking in his ear. Didn't I ask you to clean everything up? The injury on his body. Tano could no longer hear the sound, and he passed out again. By the time I woke up completely, it was already night. Tano groaned and slowly opened his eyes. Everything around him was unfamiliar. He was surrounded by walls made of mud and looked old. He used his good hand to support the bed, trying to get up. Are you awake? Stop moving. A young man opened the curtain and came in. Seeing Tano's actions, he hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. The wound on your body has just been stitched up, don't collapse it. Did you save me? Tano's voice was a little hoarse, and he couldn't help but lick his lower lip with his tongue to moisten it a little. The young man brought him a glass of water. You should drink some water first. I didn't save you, it was my grandfather who saved you. The young man said, but his eyes were looking at Tano, with vigilance in his eyes. Thank you all. After a glass of water, it was still not enough. Tano pursed his lips and handed the glass to the boy. Can I have another glass? Wait. The young man directly brought the teapot over so that Tano could drink enough. After drinking half the bottle of water, Tano felt less thirsty. What time is it now? Tano looked around. Although there were windows, they were closed. He could only confirm that it was night. The young man thought for a while and replied, it should be just after sushi, hi shi. Yeah. Tano smiled weakly and opened his mouth but didn't know what else to ask. He was saved because of God's blessing. Grandpa has rested, and I'm going to rest too. I'll get you another pot of water. If you're thirsty, drink some, but don't move around. Grandpa said that you should at least lie down on your injury. 3 days. Tuno responded, touched his waist with his uninjured hand, and his expression suddenly froze. Where is his jade pendant? When the young man came back from fetching water, he saw that Tano's face was even paler than before. What's wrong with you? Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere? No, it's okay, it's just what I have on me. Tuno asked, paying attention to the young man's expression. The young man frowned, looked up and looked around, then pointed to the corner. It's all there. Can you please bring it to me? The young man nodded and brought those things to Tuno, but when he saw that Tuno had messed up these things and his expression was still so ugly, he asked curiously, is something missing? Maybe it was lost in the middle of the road. Tuno pursed his lips weakly. It could be seen that he was in a lot of emotions, so the young man didn't ask any more questions. Then you should rest well. The young man went out and then closed the door. He walked to his room and looked sideways. He could still see candles burning in his grandfather's room. Grandpa, haven't you slept yet? He muttered something and didn't think much about it. Lao Zhang was sitting at the table, holding the jade pendant he got from Tuno in his hand. This jade pendant is only owned by the 11 tribe. But that man doesn't have a Manzushawa tattoo on his body. What does he have to do with the 11 tribe? Put away the jade pendant. Mr. Zhang rubbed his forehead, his steps showed a bit of stagger. He walked to the bed and lay down to rest. Tuno originally thought that he would not be able to sleep, but after a while, his eyelids started to tremble. He gradually fell asleep with the rustling outside the house. This sleep, I slept until the cock crow sounded. In the yard, Zhang Yang grabbed a handful of chicken feed and sprinkled it into the chicken coop. Mr. Zhang walked out and saw his grandson busy outside. He coughed lightly and said, Xiao Yang, why don't you go see if the patient is awake? I got it, Grandpa. Zhang Yang responded, put down the bowl in his hand, turned around and entered the room where Tuno lived. Tuno had already woken up and was lying on the bed with his eyes open, not knowing what he could do. The strange thing is that he could still feel his lower body last night, but now he couldn't feel anything. As soon as Zhang Yang heard what Tuno said, he rushed out and shouted, Grandpa, come here quickly. I'm coming. Lao Zhang walked in striding and took Tuno's pulse. After a while, Mr. Zhang let go of his hand and said with a calm expression, it's okay, it's just the medicine that's taking effect. You'll be fine in the afternoon. Tuno breathed a sigh of relief. He then looked at the grandfather and grandson in front of him. I still don't know what your names are. Lao Zhang and Zhang Yang looked at each other, and the former said, my surname is Zhang. Others call me Lao Zhang. This is my grandson, Zhang Yang. My name is, Tuno. Tuno originally wanted to change his name, but he still didn't change his name. The grandfather and grandson in front of him are willing to save him. If he still uses a false name to deceive the other party, he will really feel bad. What's more, he knew very well that if the Forbidden Army found out, something would happen to the grandfather and grandson. I'll leave when I feel better. Tuno did not want to implicate these two good people. Zhang Yang glanced at Mr. Zhang's expression and said, just stay here with peace of mind. No one will find out about this place. Thanks. Tuno didn't know what to say, so he could only say thank you again. End of this chapter.